If I told you that many medieval earth-built houses, the ones we imagine as crude, poor, freezing shelters, actually stayed warmer than plenty of modern apartments with double-glazed windows and electric heaters, you'd probably think it was a joke. But the moment you step inside a Wattle and Daub house in the dead of winter, with warm air washing over your face while icy wind cuts through the world outside, you realize something shocking. Our ancestors understood heat in a way that was instinctive, precise, and incredibly effective. They didn't build homes to look nice or show status. They built them like thermal machines made of earth, straw, and wood, every detail engineered for survival. The thickness of the walls, the height of the door frames, the way air moved quietly through the room, everything worked together like gears inside a natural heating system. What shocks modern people isn't the primitive materials, but the intelligence hidden beneath them. Instead of wasting energy trying to heat every square inch, medieval builders created stable pockets of warm air microclimates that stayed several degrees hotter than the outside world, powered by nothing more than a small fire and human attention. And when you reach the end, you'll understand why these simple techniques were far more advanced than we give them credit for. If you've ever lived in a modern house that still feels icy in winter, maybe it's time to ask yourself, were medieval people really backward? Or have we simply forgotten how to build a home that truly knows how to stay warm? If you've ever wondered why medieval peasant houses had doors so low you practically had to bow to get inside, the answer hits you the moment you slip through that tiny frame. A burst of warm air rises straight into your face, as if the house itself is holding the heat in with invisible hands. That low doorway wasn't a design flaw, it was a survival calculation. The lower the door, the less warm air escapes every time someone enters. A tiny detail, but one that could mean the difference between a livable night and a freezing one. And just like that, every part of the house becomes a shield against the winter wind. The whole structure is angled to dodge the sharp, knife-like gusts of the cold season. Windows that look like dark little holes from the outside are actually thermal valves, covered with leather, cloth, or parchment, opened only when necessary, shut the moment the wind starts to whistle. Medieval people knew that a single draft in the wrong direction could turn a warm room into a stone-cold storage shed within hours. When you look at the construction closely, you see they weren't building for beauty, they were building to stay alive. Wind direction, door height, window placement, all of it worked together to create a living space several degrees warmer than the frozen world outside. If I told you that a material most people today consider dirty, cheap, even disgusting earth mixed with straw and animal dung was actually a heat retention technology more sophisticated than a lot of modern concrete walls, you'd probably think I was exaggerating. But here's the twist that stops everyone in their tracks. Medieval earthen walls didn't just stay warm, they kept temperatures more stable than many modern homes that freeze every winter. The secret lies in a principle our ancestors understood long before anyone had an engineering degree: thermal inertia. Clay doesn't heat up quickly, but once it's warm, it holds that heat for an incredibly long time. That turned the entire house into a giant thermal battery, absorbing warmth from the hearth during the day and releasing it slowly through the night, keeping the interior several degrees more stable than the world outside. The straw wasn't added to save material. It created thousands of tiny air pockets, a natural insulation layer so effective that modern construction science is still trying to replicate it. And the dung? It's full of fibers, enzymes, and natural binders that make the mixture elastic, crack-resistant, water-resistant, and shockingly durable. That's why some of these walls have stood for centuries. Here's the real shock. Plenty of modern houses still get damp, still get cold, still collect condensation, while these primitive earthen walls stay dry, warm, stable, and cost almost nothing. No electricity, no heaters, no fired bricks, just instinct and generations of accumulated experience. Once you know this, you can't help but wonder, were the ancients poor, or are we the ones building our homes the wrong way? And if you've ever seen a Wattle and Daub structure in person, tell me what you thought. I'd love to hear how you see this technology now. What surprises most modern people isn't the earthen walls or the thatched roof. It's something far smaller, yet powerful enough to decide whether a house stays warm or turns into a freezer: the wind. For medieval builders, wind wasn't just a part of nature. It was an enemy, one that could slip through the tiniest crack and collapse the entire warmth ecosystem they worked so hard to build. That's why every house was rotated to face away from the prevailing winter winds, as if they had a built-in aerodynamics map long before the word aerodynamics existed. The entire backside of the house pointed directly into the cold blast, while the front faced a quieter, calmer direction to reduce the force slamming into the walls. One small mistake in orientation, and the whole room could turn into an ice cellar overnight. Even the doorway wasn't random. It was low, narrow, and recessed deep into the wall, forming a wind trap. The moment you duck your head to step inside, the cold air gets stopped at the threshold, while the warm air stays inside like water held in a giant clay jug. The windows were so tiny they were, practically slits, covered with leather, cloth, or parchment. They weren't made for the view. They were instruments for controlling heat loss, opened just enough for light, shut the moment the wind shifted. Seen as a whole, a medieval house wasn't primitive at all. It was a structure fine-tuned by survival instinct. Where the wind came from, where the cold slipped in, how the warm air moved, every bit of it was calculated, tested, and perfected by generations who understood one truth. In winter, the wind is the real enemy, and the house must be built to fight it. No one is ever mentally prepared for the first shock of stepping into a medieval peasant home. The floor bare earth, damp, cold, and hard as frozen mud. Every step lands with a heavy, muted thud, and in winter the chill rising from the ground can stab straight into your feet within seconds. But what really stuns modern people isn't the harshness of that floor, it's how medieval villagers tamed it. With nothing more than straw, animal hides, and a bit of cleverness, they turned the ground itself into an insulation system that feels almost impossible. They laid straw in thick, rustling layers, creating thousands of tiny air pockets, a natural insulating mat that even today's materials struggle to match. On top of the straw came sheepskins, goatskins, or whatever furs they had, adding warmth while protecting the straw from rotting too quickly. Wealthier families layered thick woven wool rugs over everything, while poorer households used patched-together cloth scraps, yet even those scraps added surprising insulation. This primitive heated floor wasn't just for comfort, it was where people walked, worked, slept, raised children, and shielded themselves from the sub-zero cold seeping up from the soil. And in the end, it wasn't luxury that made it work, it was a mix of poverty, experience, and pure survival instinct. A simple solution, born from necessity, but brilliant enough to keep an entire family alive through the worst winters. Among all the warmth-keeping secrets of the Middle Ages, there's one modern people rarely notice yet to our ancestors. It bordered on ritual, fabric. Not for decoration, but as protective charms against the cold that seeped into every corner of the home. Step into a medieval house on a winter night, and the first thing you see isn't the hearth or the bed. It's the curtains, hangings, and heavy cloth drifting in the firelit dark, turning the room into a warm cave where the light only reaches partway. To medieval families, fabric didn't just block wind, it held the spirit of warmth itself. Thick woven wool tapestries hung across the walls, like a second skin for the house, sealing every crack where night air might slip in. Every floor rug wasn't just decor, it was a sacred shield against the cold rising from the earth. Bed curtains were heavy and dense. Pull them shut, and the bed instantly transformed into a secret warm tent where body heat collected, creating a world completely different from the icy room beyond the fabric. Even the way they tied cords, folded layers, or decorated edges felt like a small ritual. An inherited magic of heat retention passed quietly from one generation to the next. Inside that space, you realize these weren't just materials. They formed a soft, defensive system crafted from instinct, belief, and a deep understanding of wind, air, and heat. Medieval people were poor in possessions, but rich in wisdom, using every scrap of cloth to bend the winter cold to their will. Among all the survival weapons medieval people had, nothing was more sophisticated or more dramatic than the bed with curtains, a thermal fortress engineered to defeat winter while the family slept. Picture a night when the wind howls against earthen walls, the temperature drops so low that a single exhale can frost your hair white. Someone wakes in the quote, dark, touches their head, and jolts every strand has stiffened under a thin film of ice. But all they have to do is pull the bed curtains shut, slip inside, and instantly step into an entirely different world. Inside the enclosure, breath turns into mist, but doesn't escape. It lingers, swirls, and builds a private microclimate several degrees warmer than the room itself. warm enough to keep a family alive through nights that sink below freezing. When 2 or 3 people lie close together, their body heat blends like small streams merging into one current, heating the space with a speed that feels almost unreal. Outside, the wind claws at the thatched roof as if trying to tear it off. Yet inside the curtains, you hear nothing but slow breathing and the gentle rustle of wool fabric, an ancient feeling of safety modern people rarely experience anymore. The curtain bed wasn't a luxury. It was a survival machine. And if you've ever slept in a small enclosed warm space, a tent, a cabin, even under heavy blankets, you know that feeling. If it brings any memory or instinct to mind, share it. I'd love to hear what it reminds you of from the old survival stories. The fire inside a medieval home wasn't just a place to cook, it was the living heart of the entire house, a thermal engine around which every breath, every routine, every moment of the family revolved. When night fell and the wind whipped against the straw walls as if trying to tear the roof off, one glance at the glowing embers was enough to understand why our ancestors treated the hearth like a living spirit. What shocks modern people most is how they extracted every last drop of heat from it. Smoke didn't just drift up and disappear, it left a thin layer of soot on the earthen walls, which accidentally became a natural layer of insulation. The stones placed around the fire absorbed heat all evening, then released it slowly until morning. Standing next to the hearth, you could hear the wood crackle sharply, feel the wave of hot air pushing back, the cold slipping through the door cracks. That fire even created an invisible hierarchy within the room. Children and elders always took the closest spots where the warmth was strongest. The healthier adults sat farther away, where the heat softened into a warm haze. Every position around the hearth reflected status, responsibility, and the community's instinct to protect its most fragile members. The hearth didn't just give them warmth, it shaped their entire way of life. No detail in medieval life sparks more debate or more shock than the fact that people literally slept in the same room with their animals. But the moment you look at that scene through the eyes of someone shivering in 10 degrees Celsius cold, everything suddenly becomes so logical, it borders on genius. Imagine a night of brutal snowfall, wind slicing through earthen walls like thin blades. In a dark room lit only by the dull glow of embers, the breath of a cow standing in the corner rises in thick white clouds so dense you can actually see it rolling and folding in the firelight. Its heavy breathing fills the room with a steady rhythm, each exhale releasing a soft wave of warm air that spreads like a natural heater. On the coldest nights, the body heat of the entire family, combined with the warmth from cows, goats, and sheep, created a floating pocket of warm air just above the straw-covered floor. It wasn't clean. It wasn't fragrant. There was a damp, barn-like smell hanging in the air. But that mixture was the thin line between life and death. In the moment the wind outside screamed like it was trying to rip the thatched roof away, you finally understand why medieval people saw animals not just as property, but as survival partners. Here's the truth. A single cow could raise the room temperature by several degrees, and those few degrees were enough to save an entire family. To modern ears, it sounds rough, even primitive, but in real medieval winters, it was a strategy so effective that even nobles secretly relied on it during unusually cold nights. There's a truth most modern people are never ready to hear. Medieval people didn't survive winter by luck, they survived because they understood winter far better than we do. While we depend on heaters, insulated windows, and energy-hungry technology, our ancestors built a nearly perfect heat-keeping ecosystem using nothing but earth, straw, wood, fabric, and an extraordinary sensitivity to nature. They didn't try to fight winter the way we do today. They negotiated with it, bent it to their will, and turned the cold itself into part of their survival strategy. They knew exactly when the wind would shift. They could feel where the cold was slipping in. They understood how the human body produces heat and how to turn every corner of the house into its own stable microclimate. Bed curtains, earthen walls, straw floors, animals sleeping, indoors, the hearth optimized inch by inch. All of it formed a warm network that many modern homes still fail to recreate. It may sound poor or primitive, but in reality it was a whole survival engineering system we've forgotten as we drifted away from the natural world. And that's the real punchline. Medieval people were not backward. We are the ones who forgot how to live alongside nature. If you've just finished this video and glance around your own home, tell me one thing. What do you think we could learn from our ancestors? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you want to keep uncovering survival secrets time has buried, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next journey.